Welcome in to episode 3 of the Fantasy Bums podcast. I've got Shanholtz, Tyler, and Lucas with me. Last episode, we did NFC divisional all fantasy teams. I was the North, Lucas was the South, which sucked, by the way. If you want to hear how bad it was, check out the last episode. Tyler was the East, and Shanholtz was the West. And this episode, we're just switching conferences here. We're going to the AFC. Everybody's going to keep the same divisions. Now we're just flipping to the AFC. So we're going to follow the same order. We're going to go north, south, east, and west. So I will go ahead and get us kicked off with our quarterback. And this one was a little bit of a debate for me. I bounced back and forth between Joe Shiesty and the man who just got paid. But I went with the man who just got paid in Lamar Jackson. They both are very good. I'd be happy to have either of them on my fantasy lineups. He has a higher ceiling, than Joe Burrow does. So with that being said, I think a healthy Lamar's goated. His first 3 weeks last year, he scored a combined 121 points. And one of those games, he scored 54. There just aren't too many quarterbacks in the NFL that can score 50 fantasy points in a week. But again, Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson are probably 2 of the 3 that could. But just with the rushing upside, I went with Lamar for my quarterback, and we'll head over to Lucas now with the South.
Yeah, so this team's going to be a lot better than my NFC team. I'm starting it off with the young prince down in Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence. I think this is just a no-brainer in this conference. It's just this year it is literally a conference of rookies, it looks like it's going to be. So you can't really trust them first year. They're kind of hit or miss. You don't know how they're going to play, especially going into situations like Carolina and Houston. If Will Levis does end up starting in Tennessee, that could actually be pretty decent since he does have a pretty good team around him. But Trevor Lawrence is by far the best quarterback in this. First overall pick a few years ago. And his sophomore year was just an absolute jump from his rookie year. So no-brainer here with him.
All right, now heading over to the AFC East with Tyler. Who do you got at your quarterback?
For my quarterback, I have Josh Allen. Again, I believe this is a no-brainer. There was some debate for maybe Aaron Rodgers. Mac Jones was out of the equation. Tua was a possible, but with the injuries, I'm going to go with not even the safe choice. I'd say the better choice in Josh Allen. His rushing upside. The one Jets fan talking here.
See how many Super Bowls we have after this season.
Yeah, everyone saw the Instagram video.
Yeah.
But anyway, his rushing upside is crazy. I think his rushing is a mix of Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. He can get those goal line QB sneaks and get you touchdowns or break off like a 30-yard run. You're never going to know what Josh Allen's going to do whenever he drops back. He did have a lot of interceptions, but I think he's going to turn that around this year.
All right, and slinging it over to the West for Shanholtz. I feel like all the quarterbacks in this conference are a very easy decision for all of us to make.
So one thing about this conference is that for fantasy purposes, it's very stacked. This lineup that I made for you guys includes the QB1, the points PPR RB1, the standard RB1, the tight end 1, the PPR wide receiver 3, the kicker 2, and the defense 8. So an absolutely stacked lineup I have. But obviously you have to go with the best QB from last year, which is Patrick Mahomes. A fun fact that I pulled off the internet for him is he's had the most kids/dogs named after medals with 4. His daughter's name is Sterling. His son's name is Bronze, and his dogs are Steel and Silver. So it's pretty.
Another fun fact about him is his brother got arrested today. So.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, he posted bail at 100,000, so he's out now. I saw that.
And he also beat Post Malone in beer pong, and Post Malone has a signature of his a tattoo of Mahomes' signature from after that beer pong game. So, just diving into the actual stats now. Over the last 5 years, he's QB1, QB4, QB4, QB7, and QB1. So obviously, you're going to get a top 10 finish from Mahomes. Not only is he a dog in real life, but in fantasy as well. You can always count on him. He has had over 4,000 yards in the last 5 seasons, 37 or more touchdowns in 4 of the last 5, and over 200 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns on the ground each of the last 5 seasons. So, I mean, pretty much we all know Mahomes is going to be the consensus picks. So there's just a couple stats to go along. And not even to mention that he has the greatest connection in the league with his tight end, Travis Kelce, who's on my list as the tight end 1. So the QB1 and the tight end 1 pairing together is a dominant duo. So that's my QB1.
All right. To keep the same format as the last episode, we're both going to list our RB1s and RB2s. And then it's back to me with the North. So I'll start. My RB1 is Najee Harris. He finished at RB12 last year, but over the back half of the year, whenever they took that steel plate or whatever was in his cleat that prevented him from running the football efficiently, he finished RB5 in that span when he came back from that removal. The offense got a little better with the addition of the tackle and I believe a second-year Kenny Pickett, who was Shanholtz's sleeper. If you haven't seen that episode, that's the first one, so go check that one out. I feel like his offense is going to take a pretty big step up this year, and Najee Harris is going to be a huge part of that. And if he's not, then the offense isn't going anywhere. I mean, he's a volume king, which is why you want him in fantasy. I mean, his rookie year, he had like 300 targets, which is insane. Or I'm sorry, 300 opportunities, not targets. As I said, a better offense is just going to benefit him. The better the offense is, the better he's going to be. And he's in a competitive division. Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season, so these guys are going to be winning. And as I said the past 2 episodes, you want running backs on winning teams. And for my RB2, I have Nick Chubb, who a lot of you might see should be RB1, but I'm going off of obviously last year's stats. And towards the end of the year, Nick Chubb, with the emergence of Deshaun Watson, he kind of sucked, as Tyler had him in fantasy last year, and he was a big part of the downfall of his fantasy roster. Nick Chubb is not a receiving back, although he had more receiving yards than Najee Harris. Fun fact, by 10, that is, but still more. He was the best running back in fantasy football for the first 10 weeks, and that wasn't really debatable. He was RB1. He was running for 120 and a touchdown every single game. But when Deshaun Watson came back, that kind of fell off. And I feel like the quarterback play is going to be limiting Nick Chubb this year if Deshaun Watson can't take that step or if he can't progress at all. I'm going to pass it off to Lucas in the South.
Yeah, so my RB1, I think, is a no-brainer in this division. I got Derrick Henry. Obviously, he's a top 5 running back every single year. A big reason for that's volume. He can have games where he rushes the ball 40 times a game. He does have injury concerns the past few years, and one of the big things with him is he's not a good pass catcher, which we saw last year. They used Hilliard a lot in the pass-catching game because how bad Henry is in the pass-catching game. So that is a downfall, but just the pure volume that he has just excels him above everybody else. He does have those games where he has 30 carries and 60 yards, but usually he throws in like 3 touchdowns those games too, so you don't even have to worry about the lack of yardage.
Yeah. No, okay, before we move off of Derrick Henry, just looking at his opportunities alone, he had 390 opportunities if you factor in his attempts and his targets. There aren't too many running backs in the NFL that get that kind of work and stay healthy throughout the majority of the season.
And then for my RB2, I have another bell cow in the division, Jonathan Taylor. I think Jonathan Taylor has a lot of similar aspects with Derrick Henry, and you're going to see it over the next few years. His first 2 seasons, he finished RB6 and RB1. He's an absolute monster. Last year, he was hurt, which is another thing with bell cow running backs. You do have the injury aspect of it. But when you look at him, and especially with this offense with a rookie QB coming in, the offense isn't the greatest. They're going to lean on Jonathan Taylor, and he's going to be like Henry where he carries the ball 30 times a game, and that volume is really what you want.
All right, those are Lucas's RBs in the South, and I'm going to sling it over to Tyler.
This division is very light on running backs, I will say. It's very receiver heavy. I had a blast making the receiver part of this team, but the running backs were very lacking. I think there's really only 2 guys that make the cut on this team, the first being Ramondre Stevenson. Stevenson is a fan favorite in my opinion. I love seeing Stevenson run the ball. My roommate's a Patriots fan. I always checking on the games just to see Stevenson, get those long carries, get a pass out of the backfield. I love watching him run. He's a very hard runner. He fights for every single yard. And the other running back that I have is kind of a questionable one. He does have a big question mark coming into the season due to an ACL injury last year, but I have Breece Hall. Brees Hall, when he was in, was a monster. I had him for a little bit on one of my teams, and I loved every minute of it. He can catch out of the backfield. He can run up the middle. He can run outside. This man can do it all. And a healthy Brees Hall will help the Jets get that Super Bowl ring that Lucas is so desperate for.
All right, and handing the ball off to Shanholtz here for his two relatively stacked, let me just leave it at that, RB room. It's probably the best in the divisions out of AFC and NFC. So have fun explaining these two and trying to convince people why they're not good.
All right. So, yeah, like I said earlier, this division has PPR and standard running back ones, which is Austin Eckler. Standard RB4 and PPR RB1. So you're going to get a RB5 finish regardless of whatever you play. For PPR, he's finished RB4 higher in 3 of the last 4 years. So high-end RB1 potential always with him. He had 204 rushing attempts for 915 yards and 13 touchdowns, which tied him for RB2. I mean, you can just run the stats off on these guys, honestly. RB2 in yards, RB1 in targets, RB1 in catches, RB2 in receiving touchdowns as the running back. I mean, there's just nothing this guy can't do on the receiving side of things. And he's on a good offense on a playoff team. And their defense also is pretty good on their side as well. So there's going to be opportunities both ends. Defense could put you in the red zone or the other side of the 50 more often for touchdown opportunities. So, I mean, Austin Eckler is pretty much a consensus 1-1 in most every single year. And then for my second running back, I have Josh Jacobs, who's just as good, just flipped. PPR RB3 and standard RB1. So either way you look at it, you're getting RB1. He finished within RB12 the last 3 years in PPR. So, I mean, you're always going to get somewhat of a good finish with him. 340 rushing attempts, which is RB2. He led the league in yards last year, 1,653. And he tied RB4 with the 12 touchdowns. So on the ground, he's an absolute monster. He had the longest rush in the NFL last year, which everyone probably remembers, that overtime 86-yard run to seal the game. So he has explosive potential, can always break a big play. And he finished with an RB10 in 9 games last year out of 17. So over a 50% rate finishing within the RB10.
That's
so
crazy.
You really can't – yeah. So either one of these guys is just an absolute steal. Well, not steal because you're going to pay for them, obviously, but
Yeah.
2 guys you definitely want on your team. But another thing about Jacobs is he's also a threat in the passing game as well. 64 for 53, really good catch rate, 400 yards, no touchdowns, unfortunately, but you don't really see much change in regard to quarterback as far as it's going to affect Jacobs. So Jacobs is definitely the RB2 on this list.
Pretty strong RB room. It's hard to argue against any of those guys.
Yeah, definitely probably one of the best RB rooms in the league.
Yes. And I will say, back to how we were talking about Derrick Henry in the South, Josh Jacobs did actually get over that 400 opportunity mark. He had 340 attempts and he had 64 targets, putting him at 404 total opportunities, which is just absurd. With Devontae Adams as a little spoiler, as we'll get to here in a minute.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs had over 2,000 all-purpose yards. So
yeah, I mean, 400 opportunities, 2,000 all-purpose yards, and 12 touchdowns, and he doesn't finish PPR RB1. It's pretty crazy. So that just shows you how good Austin Eckler is.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right, so now we're going to start with the wide receivers. Again, we're going to get wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. So starting in the north, I have Jamar Chase. Pretty straightforward pick. You know, it's Jamar Chase. He is projected probably to be the wide receiver 2 behind Justin Jefferson. I've seen cases where he's wide receiver 3 behind Cooper Kupp, which is very understandable. But Jamar Chase just has that electric performance, that electric catch that just sends his weekly performance over the top. There's been so many games where you're like, oh, Jamar Chase has 18 points. That's a pretty good game. And then you put your phone down for 2 minutes, and then the next time you pick up your phone, he has 12 more points because he caught an 80-yard touchdown pass. It's ridiculous what he can do with the ball in his hands. He's one of the most electric players, one of the most fun players to watch in the league, and he's just going to get better and better with that Burrow and Chase connection. This offense is going to be insane this coming year, and I want almost all shares of it if I can. So going to my wide receiver 2 now, somebody who silenced a lot of haters, and a lot of people were questioning him, and I think he just kind of laid that to bed, and that's Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper with the scenery change, going from Dallas, high-powered offense, a lot of scoring, all that stuff, to the Browns. And if you followed football for the past 10 years, you know the Browns haven't been very good. Well, Amari Cooper was good this year as he finished wide receiver 8, top 10. Nobody thought he'd be there. He was drafted. I mean, I stared him down in the 6th round, and I was like, I don't think I can take this. But, he ended up finishing top 10. Was a very quiet season. He was really good at home, okay on the road. And again, the same thing with Nick Chubb. Whenever Deshaun Watson came in, his production went down. So if he can replicate this next year, it's all going to depend on quarterback play. He is talented
That
enough.
should tell you a thing or two about Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I know, right? If your 2 best players on offense took a step down whenever you came in,
Yeah, you can't
what
get
does
him
that
the
say
ball.
about the offense? Yes,
I was not a
he's
fan of that trade from day one.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a later episode. Your hatred
Not
for
a big
Deshaun
Deshaun Watson fan.
No, he proved that he's an elite talent this year. He proved that he should be in fantasy lineups and he shouldn't be doubted. So he's my wide receiver 2, the Lucas with the AFC South, and his wide receiver 1.
Yeah, so my wide receiver 1, I think by far the best receiver in this division. There's not a lot of options in this division. This is kind of the weaker position in it, but I have Christian Kirk. He finished PPR and standard wide receiver 11. I mean, he deserved it. He got paid last year, and he proved why he got paid. And the Jags offense just took such a big jump that it helped him excel. I believe he scored 8 touchdowns. He had 1,100 yards, only 84 receptions. The only thing you got to look at with him is how Calvin Ridley affects him. You don't really know how that's going to go. You don't know if Calvin Ridley's going to take over wide receiver 1 or if it's still going to be Christian Kirk. But either way, as of right now, best receiver in the division by far.
Who would you want to get if you were sitting there and Kirk and Ridley are on the board? That's just your personal opinion.
Personally, I think as of right now, they're like interchangeable. Like they could legitimately go back-to-back picks.
I like Ridley, but I just remember how dominant he was whenever he was actually playing.
Yeah,
so
that's
I have
the
a little bit
thing.
of a biasy pick, but
Yeah, that's the thing with me with Ridley too, is he was so dominant when he played, but there's always the aspect of if he's going to play like that again that everybody always tries to argue.
yeah,
But
that's true. He had a year
if
off.
you're
So.
going off of that, then I think that you would have to take Ridley because Ridley, I believe, finished top of 5 the year
I
before.
think he was 4 that year.
Yeah.
4 or 3.
Yeah,
So-
and he was the only person on that offense. He was.
Yeah, that's true.
It was basically him. So,
But you got to
Yeah,
think
Julio
the
there,
Jags
but
offense
I
this
don't know
year.
how old
They're
he was.
Yeah, the Jags offense this year is
That's
definitely
true.
looking to take a big jump and try to be one of the top offenses in the league with all the weapons that they have now. And then going into my wide receiver 2, I have Michael Pittman Jr. I picked him over Ridley just based off of the sole fact that you don't really know what's going to go on there. Pittman finished wide receiver 27, I believe.
which was a massive disappointment.
That's what I was about to say. Pretty big
Very much,
disappointment
yeah.
for him.
Yep.
There was a lot of talk about how he was going to end up being a top 10 wide receiver this year, but I really don't think you can put it all on him because Matt Ryan is just terrible.
Abysmal play from Matt Ryan.
If you look at
Leading
Pittman,
the league
he had
in
99 receptions and didn't even have 1,000 receiving yards. So like Matt Ryan was legitimately throwing the ball 2 yards down the field.
Yeah.
And 4 receiving touchdowns is just something that I don't see staying. Like I can see him scoring at least 3 to 4 more this year, even with Richardson not knowing how he's going to play. Pittman's a big receiver. All he needs is a QB that can throw it up to him.
Yeah.
So he's who I got a wide receiver too. I think he should take his jump back to what he was supposed to take this year.
Moving on to probably the most stacked wide receiver room in the conference at the AFC East.
Yeah, like I said, I had a lot of fun making this wide receiver room, making this flex room because it is nothing but talent. I'm going to start off with my wide receiver 1 with Stephon Diggs. I'm going with the Allen Diggs stack, which is something that I had in my my work league. I was in a league with a bunch of guys at my work, and I ended up losing that league because a lot of other things happened. Like I had Jonathan Taylor who got hurt and a bunch of other guys that were injury prone, but back to Diggs, he's an elite level talent. Like you saw what happened whenever Diggs came in and the jump that Josh Allen took whenever Diggs got into that room. Josh Allen went from like a bottom tier quarterback to a top 5 quarterback. That's what he brings to a team, is Tyreek Hill for the Miami Dolphins. Now, when Tyreek and Tua were on the field, it was crazy. It was like lightning in a bottle. I remember sitting watching that Ravens game live where
Mhm.
they were down like 2, 3 scores, and then he just kept heaving it to Tyreek Hill, and he was just always open. It was
Yeah.
crazy. He would just always be down there wide open, and it's hard to see what's happened to Tua with the concussions and the injuries that he's faced with that. I hope he comes back because I love Tua as a player, and especially if you're invested in Tyreek Hill, I would want Tua throwing the ball to him because when he was not on the field, Tyreek Hill was not the same player. He needs that quarterback there to help him out a little bit, but then again, Tyreek Hill can just make plays that nobody else can make.
Yeah. The only other person in the league that can make plays like him is probably his teammate on the other side of the field, just with
Oh yeah.
speed and size alone. Now, heading over to the last division we have, the AFC West. Shanholtz, go ahead and we can talk about your guys real quick.
The first one's going to be a pretty unanimous wide receiver 1, and then the second one's going to probably turn some heads, but I'll explain later. So my wide receiver 1 is Devontae Adams from the Raiders. Standard, he was wide receiver 2, PPR, wide receiver 3. Everyone knows how good Devontae Adams is. He's very arguably the best route runner in the league. Finished with him wide receiver 3, 4 out of the last 5 years. And the only time he didn't is 2019 when he got injured and only played 12 of the games. And he still had a 23 finish. 180 targets. I mean, no one ever gets that. I think the only one more might have been Jefferson, maybe. So he finished wide receiver 2 in that. 100 catches puts him at wide receiver 7. 1,516 yards puts him at wide receiver 3. And he finished with the most receiving touchdowns in the league with 14. So he obviously has a nose for the end zone. And then a fact about him that I really like, and he's always had this, even in his time at Green Bay, 15.16 yards per catch. Every time he catches the ball, it seems like he's 10, 12 yards down the field. So he always gets separation due to his insane route running. And that just boosts on, because every time he catches it, he's already at 2.5 fantasy points per catch if you add PPR to it. So you want people who catch the ball further down the field, someone who's just running screens or drags or whatever. So he gets it done further down the field. And that's not to say he doesn't have any legs behind him as well. He can also, run a few yards after he catches it. The departure of Waller gives him more targets, obviously. Jacoby Myers basically is just a substitute for Renfro, so I don't see much happening there. And a lot of people are worried about Carr leaving and getting replaced, but Devontae Adams is just too good. His reputation is just too high not to, see the target share that he demands. So I think Garoppolo is going to look his way a lot more than people think.
Yeah, he almost feels quarterback proof at this point.
And then my wide receiver 2, this pick is more of a fantasy land if this guy doesn't get hurt. He always usually finds a way to sideline, but it's Keenan Allen of the Chargers. Yes, he finished wide receiver 41 and 42 last year, but when he plays, he's an absolute stud. He's kind of the same as Devontae Adams when it comes to his route running tree. Very good footwork, just gets separation very easily, a lot better than most players in the league. When he plays 16 games, he does finish very, very high. Every time he plays 16 games, he has not finished below wide receiver 14. So you're getting a low-end wide receiver 1, a high-end wide receiver 2 out of him if he plays the whole season. If he plays the whole season, he doesn't finish under 1,130 yards receiving. The lowest is 1,138 in 2021. So you're getting over 1,100 yards from this guy if he's healthy. The last half of the season, this last season, so 2022, from week 11 to the playoffs, finished wide receiver 12 or better in 50% of his games. So, I mean, I don't see the deterioration happening with him in his game. It's just, is he on the field? But he did not finish above wide receiver 29 in any of those games last year when he was on the field. So, I mean, worst case scenario, wide receiver 29. I mean, I like that odds. I mean, that's a fluke game for him almost. I mean, you're going to get a wide receiver 14, 50% of the time with him. So I like him if he's healthy. He's my wide receiver 2.
Now we're going to go to the big guys that play just outside the tackles, but inside the wide receivers. They're called tight ends. I'm going to start here in the AFC North, and mine is should be a pretty much unanimous as well. We got Mark Andrews. He is a tough character. It's last year if you had him, I mean, he finished tight end 5, but man, it was a ride. up and down and then up and then finally back down. And a part of that was due to Lamar, which is one of my notes. Healthy Lamar, he's top 3. He's behind Kelsey with a healthy Lamar, if not in front of Kelsey, as he finished tight end 1 2 years ago when Lamar had that insane season. He's an insane freak athlete. He has hands. He can run. He's athletic, and he's the number 1 target for an elite level quarterback, and that's everything you want. He is very similar to Travis Kelsey, just not as good. He finished the year with 73 receptions on 113 targets, 847 yards, and 5 touchdowns.
Exactly how scared are you? Because the Baltimore Ravens get clowned every year for not having any wide receivers, the Mark Andrews show. How scared are you for his fantasy value that they're going to try to overcompensate and throw strictly to the wide receiver? Do you think Andrews is going to be too good not to, give him his target share?
So, if it's one thing that I've realized by watching football and being an Eagles fan, is GMs, coaches, managers, whatever you want to call them, all those guys usually never listen to the public. They're going to feed their guys. The only time that I saw this and it actually kind of worked was whenever the Falcons fans were pissed at Arthur Smith for not utilizing Kyle Pitts the right way, and then they started to, and then he got hurt. But I think Mark Andrews is just way too good for him to even be the number 2 target in the offense, even though they have a healthy Rashad Bateman, even though they have Odell, even though Zay Flowers, right? Was that the receiver they just drafted?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I mean, Mark Andrews is just proven. I think he's hands down the number 1 target in this offense. And
yeah, fair enough. I live on Instagram because I'm a young adult, so I see all the comments and and everything. So
yeah, well, there's a reason they're not GMs and coaches.
Yeah, that's true. That's why they're tweeting and stuff.
All right, we're head over to Lucas now with an emerging player at tight end.
Yeah, so my tight end in this division, I think, is a no-brainer. It's not a deep position at all. I have Evan Ingram. He finished tight end 5 last year. The only other argument there really is for a tight end would be Dalton Schultz now with the Texans. The only problem that you have there is you have no clue how they're going to utilize him since it's his first year there. They have a rookie quarterback. You just don't know how it's going to go. So I went with Evan Ingram just based off of the facts that I've stated with Christian Kirk and Trevor Lawrence. They want to become a top-tier offense. They proved they like to throw the ball last year. And Evan Ingram was finally fully healthy and had a great season. I think he finished with his most yards per catch. He had over 10 yards per catch. He had almost 100 targets. The only thing that wasn't there is touchdowns, but he's never really scored a lot of touchdowns in seasons.
Yep. And for all you Evan Ingram truthers, he finally had his breakout year in his second contract. So there you go. That's always nothing to scoff at. All right, now we're going to head over to the East with probably the weakest tight end in the conference. Well, not in the conference, within our divisional picks. So, Tyler, go ahead and we'll talk about your guy.
Yeah, unlike Lucas, there's really no clear-cut tight end that you can go with. I routed around Conklin. I routed around Hunter Henry. I don't even know who Miami's tight end is now that Gesicki's gone. I actually think Gesicki went to the Patriots, right?
I think so.
The Gesicki downfall was one of the craziest things in the NFL.
Yeah, I was riding
3 years ago. He was
an
elite tight end. He was so good.
But so I finally settled in on a man named Dawson Knox of the Buffalo Bills. I'm going with the triple stack here of Allen, Diggs, and Knox. I like Dawson Knox. The Bills are a pass-heavy offense. They really don't have a running back to kind of go out of the backfield except for James Cook. But Dawson Knox is going to get his catches. He's going to get his share of the offense. Finish tight end 9. He's not one of those guys that's going to win you a league or win you a week, but he will get consistent points. He's a consistent guy, and I'm a big fan of Dawson Knox.
Speaking of your triple stack with the 3 Bills, Knox has 6 touchdowns and Diggs had 11. Josh Allen threw for 35. So anybody that can do quick math, that's 50% of the touchdowns going to those 2 guys right there.
Yeah, it's Foster Moreau.
My sleeper, baby. I knew it.
Obviously, it's Travis Kelsey. There's no discussion here. He's just a tight end 1, period. If you draft anyone else above him, you deserve to be in a mental institution. Over his 10-year career, 6 times he's been tight end 1. So 60% of the times he's the best tight end in the league. Once he finished tight end 2, and the other 2 times he finished tight end 9. So, and those were like at the beginning of his career. I'm just going to hop on the Travis Kelce bandwagon, fan club, whatever you want to call it real quick, and just run off some stats that are just absurd to me. So between him and tight end 2 in PPR, because that's what we play, so that's what most of my stats are based off of, TJ Hawkinson was tight end 2. He had 101 more fantasy points than him. So how far is that? So that's basically the same distance as TJ Hawkinson, which was tight end 2, to a little more than Robert Tonyan. People probably don't even know who that is, honestly. He was tight end 20. So the distance between Travis Kelce and the next guy up is between tight end 2 and tight end 20. That is how far of a gap it is between Travis Kelce and the rest of the league. I mean, it's insane. So it's not even fair to really give you stats on him as a tight end. So I'm going to give you stats of him if he was a wide receiver. If he was a wide receiver, he would have finished wide receiver 5. So just to let everyone know that little fact. If he was a running back, he would have been RB4. And Patrick Mahomes is his quarterback, is my last fact. QB1, the tight end 1, that connection is insane.
All right, so heading over to the flexes now. We have 2 flexes in our league, so we're going to give you 2 flexes. So I'm going to go with my flex 1, and I went with T. Higgins from the Cincinnati Bengals, who is the wide receiver 2 on his offense, but that really doesn't matter. Him and Jamar Chase both finished with over 1,000 receiving yards, and T. Higgins finished with 7 touchdowns. Now, if you look at his game log, it says I'm pretty sure it says he's only missed 2 games, right? But if you look a little deeper, he really missed about 4 to 5 games, because 2 of those games were I'm sure if you had him in fantasy, it sucked. But the one game where they said he was good to play and it was a 1:00 start, and then at like 12:58 they sidelined him. But so the injury bugs always seem to bite him. He's a very injury-prone receiver, but when he's on the field, he's amazing. He finished wide receiver 17 in PPR, and Jamar Chase finished wide receiver 12, and Jamar Chase missed 5 games. And during those 5 games, T. Higgins, man, if you had him, it was a joy to have him for those 5 weeks. He was a monster. This offense, again, is just going to take us another step forward, as it will, all the way until either Joe Burrow retires or they draft another quarterback. And then my second flex is this one. This one's going to raise a few eyebrows, but I went with George NFL Youngboy Pickens. He's just an insane athlete. If you guys saw the draft day video, you either hated him or you loved him, and I loved him. He's a menace on the field. Again, same kind of deal as Najee Harris. Better offense equals a better George Pickens. I feel like he could take the step to be the number 1 target in the offense. I don't know, though, because Deontay Johnson is still a stud. Let's not take anything away from him. George Pickens had 801 yards on 52 catches, and he had 4 touchdowns. I mean, Kenny Pickett was average at best at throwing the ball last year and moving the ball, especially in the end zone. It was bad with him throwing the ball in the end zone. But George Pickens could take a huge step up, and I'd gladly take him at my second flex over guys like Joe Mixon, who might not even play this year, and Kareem Hunt and those kind of guys. So those are my 2 flexes, and we're going to bounce down to the South for Luke's 2 flexes.
Yeah, so my first flex, let me first say that the running back is the most stacked position in this division by far. Mm-hmm. Both of my flexes are running backs. My first one is Travis Etienne, who I think can be a top-tier running back this year. He finished RB16, but if you look half the season, he didn't really even take 50% snap share. He only scored like 4 or 5 touchdowns all year, and they didn't really utilize him in the passing game as much as you would think they would. So you look for that to step up a lot in the next year, especially if they're going to be throwing the ball more. But my insane stat for him is he rushed for 1,100 yards and had 220 carries, which is a lot of carries. But in that, he maintained 5.11 yards per carry. And then for my second flex, I have Dameon Pierce, who was a rookie last year, came out of Florida. Nobody really knew how good he was going to be. He was a mid-round pick, I believe. Yeah. He finished RB28, but he did miss 4 games. But he is a terrifying runner. If you watched him run in any game, he is absolutely terrifying if he hit a hole. He just loves running people over. and he also only scored 4 touchdowns. So if you look at the Texans offense and you think they're going to score more with everything they added this offseason, you got to think once you get these goal line opportunities, you're going to get more points out of him. So that's going to be great for his fantasy aspect. And if he gets a fully healthy season too, you look at that, that's just – it's adding up to be a great year for him.
And he should be the bell cow unless they sign somebody or bring somebody else in. But as of right now, he's the bell cow.
They did bring in Devin Singletary, but he doesn't do it for me. He's not a threat.
All right, and now we're going to go from a very running back stacked division to a very wide receiver heavy division in the AFC. So go ahead with your 2 flexes, Tyler.
So with my 2 flexes, my first being the aforementioned Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill's teammate. Again, just like Tyreek Hill, you could throw it up to either side of the field, and you got a 50-50 chance it's going to be Hill or Waddle. Hill or Waddle, Hill or Waddle. That's all it was the entire year, it felt like. I remember I had Waddle in one league and Hill in another league, and I would get notification after notification as like, 30-yard catch from Hill, 30-yard catch from Waddle, touchdown Hill. It was like, it's insane how much these 2 guys touch the ball and how much the Dolphins utilize them towards that insane performance that they had while Tua was behind the quarterback. Again, Tua is a big question mark. He might retire. He may come back. I haven't really been up to date on Tua, but it looks like he's going to return.
Yeah, I think the last I saw is he said he was going to come back and play.
Yeah, which is very good news for Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle fans because he loves both of them equally. And for my next guy, I have Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets. With Aaron Rodgers being traded, this is a great scenario for Garrett Wilson to be in. He is, I would say, elite level talent without Zach Wilson throwing the ball to him. Even Mike White was throwing the ball to him. He looked like a top 5 receiver. Anybody else, I could probably throw the ball better than Zach Wilson to Garrett Wilson. The Wilson to Wilson connection just was not there. But I believe with Rodgers coming in, they may not win a Super Bowl, but I will guarantee that Garrett Wilson's numbers will go up from an already insane year that he had.
All right, Shanholtz, how about we round out your position players here with your next 2 flexes?
Yeah, so one of my flexes is from the Chargers, and one of them, Denver, I believe, finally broke my list. So my first flex is Mike Williams, the other side of the Los Angeles Chargers receiving core. He was wide receiver 32, but he only played 13 games, so the stats could have been a lot better. He usually evens out around wide receiver 20, so low-end wide receiver 2. He had 93 targets, so barely under 100, which isn't the best, but again, he only had 13 games, so it definitely would have broke 100 for sure. 63 catches, 895 yards. I'm a big yards per catch guy, so he had 14.21 yards per catch, so he gets down the field and 4 touchdowns. Now, one thing, just his stature is one thing I really like. He's a huge wide receiver. He makes absolute highlight reel plays. It seems like every catch he makes is double teamed or like toe dragging the sideline or something. So he's a really fun player to watch. Just ain't really stat based, but fun player to watch. Red zone threat for sure. They pretty much just throw it up if it's not like wide open to someone else. He tied wide receiver 21 in fantasy points per game last year.
Do you think with the Chargers drafting the TC
Austin Johnston?
Yeah, do you think with the Chargers drafting him, do you think that affects Mike Williams and even Keenan Allen's target share?
Yeah, so we made this list, or at least I did. I made it way before the draft. I like to prepare myself with these stats, so I like to look them up a little bit before we start. So this is before the draft. Quentin Johnston will definitely, for sure, hit Mike Williams' fantasy value. Keenan, I think, is pretty much a standalone wide receiver 1 at the beginning, but that wide receiver 2 is up for grabs between Mike Williams and Johnston for sure. Moving on to the flex 2, I have Jerry Jeudy. Like I said, the first Bronco on my list, and I believe the only Bronco on my list. Wide receiver 18 in standard, wide receiver 22 in PPR. He evened out at 100 targets, 67 catches, didn't break 1,000, ended with 972 yards. like I said, I'm a yards per catch guy. So this guy also, is up there, 14.51 yards per catch. So he has some volume to his catches as far as yards go. And he had 6 touchdowns, which isn't great, but it's not like a goose egg or anything.
He also had Russell Wilson throwing him the ball.
Yeah, he had a skeleton of Russell Wilson in the backfield. And Sean Payton hopefully will boost Jerry Jeudy's fantasy value a lot. He finished wide receiver 18 already, so I really like the positions he's at. I think Russell Wilson is going to be a lot better with Sean Payton than Nathaniel Hackett. And I think that offense overall is going to be a lot better, especially if Javonte Williams figures out his injury bug, because then that's just another threat they have. They're going to have to look for the run, so the pass is going to be open, a lot more play actions, and him running down the field. Like I said, yard per catch guy.
All right, and that rounds out all of our position players, and we're going to go through kickers and defenses because we don't discriminate here on this podcast, and defenses and kickers can win you weeks if you do it the right way, and we try to do it the right way. So I'm going to start off here with my kicker. I'm going to keep it very short and very sweet. My kicker is Justin Tucker. He's the best kicker in football. All right, that's enough about Justin Tucker. Now we're going to go to the defense. We're going to go to the Ravens defense here. The one thing I really like about the Ravens defense is they always seem to be very disciplined. Their linebackers fly around the field, they make tackles, their secondary forces turnovers, and their line gets pressure almost every single time. They're very disciplined, and the only thing that scares me with them is their health. 3 defensive backs go down due to ACL tears in preseason. Pretty sure that was 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, this defense finished defense 7 with 48 sacks, 14 forced fumbles, and recovered 10 of them with 14 interceptions. And they didn't score any touchdowns, which is very, very weird for a defense to finish inside the top 8 without any touchdowns being scored. Now we're going to head down to the South for Lucas's kicker defense.
Yeah, so my kicker is the new guy in Indy, Matt Gay. This guy, if you look at his stats, every other year he's a top 5 kicker. This year is that other year. Last year he finished kicker 14. The year before that he finished kicker 5. The year before that kicker 30. The year before that kicker 4. So he's destined to finish top 5 this year. And then defense, I have Jacksonville. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. This division sucks defense-wise. The only other argument that I had was the Colts, because I feel like the Colts always have 2 games where they score like 40 fantasy points a year, and like that just kind of kicks them into the top 10 every year. But Jacksonville finished defense 6. They got Trayvon Walker. He was a rookie last year. He's a beast.
And now we're going to head over to the East for Tyler's kicker in defense.
So for my kicker, it's Tyler Bass of the Buffalo Bills. I mean, that Bills offense is electric. They're going to get down the field. They're going to score points. Most of their drives are going to end in kicks, whether it be an extra point or a field goal. 48 for 50 on extra points, 28 for 32 on field goals, kicker 7. I mean, he is a recipe to be in the top 5 next year. And moving on to my defense, there's not much to say here. I mean, it's the Patriots. Any Bill Belichick-led defense is gonna be insane. The number 1 defense last year. 54 sacks, 15 fumbles, 8 of them recovered, 19 interceptions, 7 defensive touchdowns. It's insane. This Bill Belichick-led team on the defensive side is crazy. I'm not a fan of their offense, but Bill Belichick has been known to be a defensive-minded guy, and it shows. I mean, it shows with their defense.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's not close with the boys down in New Jersey now, but yeah,
I do.
Okay.
probably
I
the
do like
right now. But my boy Sauce forcing turnovers.
It's the number 1 defense, though.
It's the number 1 defense in the
Yeah,
league.
but it's close. Like, it's getting close.
It's getting close,
Jets
but I
are
don't think
bums.
it's close enough yet.
Yeah. Now we're going to head over to the West to round out Shanholtz's relatively stacked fantasy lineup.
Yeah, so like I said, this is going to be kicker 2, defense 8 at the beginning of my section. Daniel Carlson. You could make the argument for Butker from Kansas City, but I'd much rather have Carlson just because he's almost automatic.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see at the bottom of the screen, 55 for 56 on extra points and 34 for 37 on field goals. He's almost automatic every time he steps on. and he led the league with from 50 yards out. He hit 11 of them. So if you do like us, for every yard he kicks is 0.1, I think is what it is.
Yep.
If you want a golden leg, you want a 50, 60-yard kicker that can make them. So, I mean, Carlson's definitely the one for you if you're looking for that. And like Nick said at the beginning of the kicker and defense section, they can win you games to put you in the playoffs. So don't sleep on them. You want to make sure you get a good one. And then moving to my defense, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, Denver is good, but Kansas City just has more turnover. Like, they just do more on the defensive side for me than Denver as far as fantasy. Now, NFL, they might be better. Yeah, sure. I mean, pretty much Chris Jones and Frank Clark are pretty much the only two that I could think of on the Kansas City. Maybe Ward in the secondary. But they get sacks. They just eat up sacks. Besides Philly, and I think another team, they were third with 55 sacks. And they get 11 forced fumbles, 8 fumble recoveries, 11 INTs. So they do get picks and 2 touchdowns. The touchdowns aren't really high as far as like the defensive side. I think besides the Ravens, this is the lowest one. But the sacks, just you get a point for every sack. So 55 of them, you're going to get a couple points. They finished defense, special teams 8. And that's my kicker and defense for the AFC West.
All right. Anybody have any honorable mentions they want to throw out here before we wrap up this episode? Thank you for everybody listening. We have our Instagram up here. Oh, that's the wrong way. Instagram up here, TikTok, Twitter, and then our YouTube's all the way at the end, as you can see at the top of the screen. They are all posted under a link tree and each of those bios. So if you follow one, just go to the bio. You can find the rest of them. Follow, subscribe, drop comments, likes, all that kind of stuff. It helps a lot. Let us know down below what team or what division you think won. It should be pretty obvious if you kind of just paid attention to the whole episode. It's probably the West, but let us know your opinions. Thank you for watching. Hopefully we'll see you again. Make sure you follow us everywhere so you stay up to date on all of our releases. And we'll catch you next time.